Welcome to the Heavy Spoilers Show. I'm your host Paul, and in this video we're breaking down House of the Dragon. Season 2 episode 2 is packed with Easter eggs, and the civil war sees brother versus brother. Throughout this video we're going to go through it all and talk about everything you might have missed. I also want to go over the major book differences as well as some of the characters that they talk about in the episode. As always, heavy spoilers will be saved until the end of the video, and I'll give you a heads up before we get to that point. Please hit the thumbs up if you enjoy it, and make sure you subscribe for our breakdowns on the show every single week. With that out of the way, thank you for clicking this. Now let's get into House of the Dragon. Now we pick up in the aftermath of Blood and Cheese and see bloody bed sheets being carried by his servant. This scene's later reflected in the mattress, which we see is completely covered in blood. The staff and servants are all assembled and the hounds are called in to hunt through the keep. Now the book explains what happened in these moments with this passage going over their fates. Strange to say, the ratcatcher and the butcher were true to their word. They did no further harm to Queen Helaena or her surviving children, but rather fled with the prince's head in hand. A hue and a cry went up, but Cheese knew the secret passageways as the gods did not, and the killers made their escape. Now this is something that we see throughout the episode with blood being caught early on. Now from here we cut to Aegon II smashing up his dad's model of Valyria. Bit crap mate, because that was his bloody favourite train set. Kinda reminds me of that bit in Citizen Kane though, where he just stumbles about smashing up the room. Tom Glincarny, he really gets to flex his acting muscles this episode, as do a lot of the cast. From the off, I think this is the best acted entry, with everyone really delivering what I'd call a knockout performance. Now Aegon destroying this symbolises one of two things. Firstly, in destroying the model, it symbolises he's destroying his father's legacy by having a civil war between the siblings. Secondly, we have this being a model of Valyria, which is where the Targaryens come from. Not to get too spoilery, but if you've seen Game of Thrones, then you'll know the Targaryens don't start off on the best foot. This civil war will greatly weaken the house, and thus the destruction of this city symbolises that. He also screams out about traitors and villains, and it's clear there's suspicion in his own house. In the end, he strips Otto of the hand, and it all splinters out directly from this moment. Returning home, Aemon puts two and two together after discovering one of Maegor's secret passages open. He also realises the coins from the map have been moved, which is something he and Kristen laid out last week. I love the shot where he takes one and holds it over his eye, and in death people used to put coins on corpses' eyes, as this was so they could pay the ferryman in the afterlife. Might be reaching, well I definitely am, but this shot to me, it highlights how he narrowly missed death by evoking images of it. Cutting to Alicent and Otto, we then get a strong focus on her necklace. This shows her commitment to the faith of the Seven, which the symbol on it is of course in relation to. Throughout the show, she's wore several of these Faith of the Seven necklaces, with it being a mainstay in a lot of her later outfits. Come the end of the episode, she takes this off and wears something more akin to what she had on when she was younger. I feel like this highlights her lack of faith in these dark times and a return to the sin that she shares with Sir Kristen.
The gods punish us. They punish me.
At an hour and 5, we see her say she's sinned and then scratch out where the Faith of the Seven necklace used to be. So yeah, I feel like her faith's being stripped away, and it's kind of balanced out by Otto's logical side. Otto is ever the strategist in this episode, while Alicent seems completely torn up. He says early on that some good may yet come from it, and it's clear he wants to politicise the death. It's something that we see a lot in modern day, with the death of kids often being used to push a cause. I don't think it's House of the Dragon necessarily even playing on certain things. I've just looked throughout history and seen how often this is done. Otto is someone who's playing the game without emotion, whereas everyone else is completely torn up. This is what loses it for him in the end, as they don't see him as being hungry for revenge. Summoning the small council, Aegon goes off blaming everyone, even Kristen, who says he was in bed. Which technically, he was, mate. With your mum. I think this blame here though, and seeing that mattress later on, that's something that makes Kristen step up and get revenge. He also just absolutely hates Rhaenyra, and might even relish the fact that he's the one who ordered the hit. We're then joined by Larys the Clubfoot, who announces the gold cloak was detained. He says Blood was one of them, noted for his brutality, and this is something that pulls from the book. When describing Blood and Cheese, the passage says, one had been a sergeant in the city watch, big and brutal. He had lost his gold cloak for beating a whore to death whilst in a drunken rage. Larys also said they found him fleeing with a head, which is also a passage that we get in the work. 2 days later, Blood was seized at the Gate of the Gods, trying to leave King's Landing with the head of Prince Jaehaerys hidden in one of his saddle sacks. Under torture, he confessed he'd been taking it to Harrenhal to collect his reward from Prince Damon. He also gave up a description of the whore he claimed had hired them, an older woman, foreign by her talk, cloaked and hooded, very pale. The other harlots called her Misery. Now, these are scenes that we get shortly after, but I think saying under torture, it's a bit of a stretch. It reminded me of that scene in Deadpool 2, yeah, where Cable goes to interrogate Weasel and he just instantly gives up the names because he can't handle it. Aegon does get his wish as well, as he says,
I'll kill him myself.
We do well to get what information we can from the blackguard.
However, Otto needs that info first. There's even suspicions that it might not be Rhaenyra, with Lord Jasper suggesting that others were behind it. I think these fractures and betrayals, they're also what have a hand in pushing out Otto. He was loyal to Viserys, who in the end was loyal to his daughter. So you can see how, in the madness of grief, Aegon might turn against the others, even though Otto is clearly loyal to his grandson. However, he's a politician too and wants to have the child's body paraded through the streets as it being something that will turn people against Rhaenyra. Now, one thing that we're known for at the channel is our speed, and our browser opera goes a long way to upping our productivity, editing, and everything we need at the channel. Aria Opera Browser's AI is built into the sidebar to make it easily accessible. Using Aria gives you clear answers instantly, and it can streamline your workflow by providing real-time information. It makes everything easier and really elevates Opera above every other browser. On top of that, there's also Tab Island. This saves space in the window, and it also comes with context-based tab grouping to make for effortless browsing. That super-powered sidebar has a lot of functionality, including a messenger that integrates Facebook Messenger, WhatsApp, Telegram, and more. The Messenger pop-up allows you to use it without leaving your browser, and there's no extension needed. The sidebar has a built-in music player as well. It allows you to quickly switch between 7 streaming services. This includes Spotify, Apple Music, Deezer, Tidal, and more. So everything you need is built into the browser, including a VPN to keep you protected. It's free and unlimited, and it won't log your activity or collect your information. All this stuff's built into the browser as well, so again, no extensions needed. All you have to do to download it is click my link in the description. Opera is the browser that makes your computer sing, so click my link in the description and go and download it now. Thanks. Now from here we cut to Helaena with Alicent talking her into doing the parade. This ends up overwhelming her, and it's possible her psychic intuition causes even more grief. We obviously don't know what's going on with her, but she's made a number of correct predictions. I feel like she's also likely an empath who picks up on the grief, and this causes her even more pain. Now, the Queen never really recovers in the book, and in describing her in the aftermath of Blood and Cheese, the passage says, "Though Blood and Cheese had spared her life, Queen Helaena cannot be said to have survived that fateful dusk. Afterwards, she would not eat, nor bathe, nor leave her chambers, and she could no longer stand to look upon her son Maelor, knowing she'd named him to die." Bit of a difference there. In the book, she chose Maelor to die, and then they killed Jaehaerys, but in the show, they just went straight with Jaehaerys. No Maelor involved. We've done a big breakdown on how Blood and Cheese is even worse in the book, so if you want that all filled in, then click on that video at the end. Anyway, moving on. The king had no recourse but to take the boy from her and give her over to their mother, the Dowager Queen Alicent, to raise as if he were her own. Aegon and his wife slept separately thereafter, and Queen Helaena sank deeper and deeper into madness, whilst the king raged and drank and raged. Now, these psychic predictions are something I want to discuss further in another video, where we'll talk about what Helaena really is. I will touch upon it here though, and last week there were a couple of things that we only know now after seeing episode 2. This mainly happened when Aegon went to Helaena, and we could see her knitting a shroud for her dead son. He obviously wasn't dead at this point, and she was obviously just doing it instinctively after seeing it in a vision. She also whispers they only want the boy, which you can slightly pick up just before it happens. When bringing up the rats as well, she looked directly at Jaehaerys' bed. It's believed that Helaena may be what's known as a dreamer, and in the Game of Thrones verse, this basically makes her an oracle. Dreamers have appeared throughout the lore, however, Helaena wasn't one in the books. Still though, it appears that she's going that way, and it would also tie in closely with her family. Aegon's dream is something that's been brought up numerous times, and Daenerys Targaryen also predicted doom in a dream. She envisioned the fall of Valyria, and her family listened to her advice. Thus they were able to escape before the volcanic eruption, and they relocated themselves to Dragonstone. Now, being a dreamer also means someone has trouble distinguishing reality from prophecy. It's something he talked about at one point during Dune, and we get an inner monologue with Paul. Because he keeps having the same visions over and over, it gets to the point where he doesn't know if they're happening right there, if they're in the past, or if they're just another vision. I think the realization of horror on Helena's face last week was her actually realizing that she wasn't in a dream. I do wonder if we'll see her eyes rolling back like Bran's were, or like Alicent's last week. Hey, you having that? Now, speaking of Alicent though, she's having to really deal with the consequences of her actions. Another thing last week was that when she was at the Sept, she lit a candle and the subtitles had her whispering Lucerys Velaryon. Had she been being how she's in public, she would have said Lucerys strong, and it shows what she really believes is different to what she's putting out in the world. Now honestly, I thought this parade scene was so messed up. I don't know if we can show it on YouTube because of monetization. It's been a nightmare recently, but you see little Prince Jaehaerys' head kinda wobbling a bit and can even see the stitches around his neck. It's all propaganda though, with the man leading the procession constantly announcing it's the work of Rhaenyra the Cruel. Though she wasn't specifically named this in the book, she was described as being as cruel as any king before her. Now you might also notice that the golden Targaryen sigils used throughout the banners. Last week when we travelled to the keep though, there was mainly the Hightower symbols everywhere. This enforces the idea that these are the true Targaryens, even though closer to home they rock the Hightower symbol. Also, as we pass through the streets, I believe we see Hugh Hammer's wife at roughly 15 minutes 20. We'll talk about her later on in the episode, and she obviously shares some common ground due to her having a sick child. We see the confetti and then leaves drifting down to Helaena, which sort of plays off a shot that we see later on. At 27 minutes, Rhaenyra looks at the dust in her room, which seems to glow golden like the pieces here. I feel like with Helaena, we're seeing the descent, whereas with Rhaenyra, the blacks are starting to rise. Hence the movement. I'm probably reading into that way too much, but both shots I felt got a lot of focus and visually shared some similarities. These include the way the particles move and also the slow motion reaction shots that we get after them. Now we then see blood getting smashed like the like button, and later learn that all the ratcatchers were hanged. This led to Cheese being caught in the show, whereas in the book, we don't really learn what happened to him. The work says, after 13 days of torment, Blood was at last allowed to die. Queen Alicent had commanded Larys Clubfoot to learn his true name so that she might bathe in the blood of his wife and children, but our sources do not say if this occurred. Sir Luther Largent and his gold cloak searched the Street of Silk from top to bottom and turned out and stripped every harlot in King's Landing, but no trace of Cheese or the White Worm was ever found. In his grief and fury, Aegon II commanded that all the city's ratcatchers be taken out and hanged, and this was done. Sir Otto Hightower brought 100 cats into the Red Keep to take their place. Now, there were theories that when they made it to the sewers, that Blood gutted him and then took his money. Later on, Jaime found bones when smuggling people through the tunnels, and it was believed that they belonged to him. That's just a theory time though. I feel like it works really well. I'm sorry, I'm an idiot. I feel like it works really well in the show though, and just seeing the dog looking up at his master and crying, it's pretty heartbreaking, even if he did kick him, which he deserved to die for that, mate. The sad thing is, though, the Greens never knew if they actually got justice, and they killed way more people than they needed to make sure. Blood could have probably picked him out of lineup, but a brutal crime deserves brutal retribution. This brutality and the reaction is then shown to us on Dragonstone when we hear Rhaenyra's learning of the truth. She's furious because it wasn't her, and it's like when Darth Vader got blamed for blowing up the Death Star. The book never really gives us much of her reaction, but here it's clear she's furious at what happened. She's lost a son herself, and Helena's now a grieving mother just like her. She also views Helaena as innocent, and it shows how the victims in war are often not those in charge. The people who get hurt are the ones who fight on the front lines, the small folk, or the ones who get caught in the crossfire, whereas those making the orders are often out of harm's way.
I would remind you only that when princes lose their temper, it is often others who suffer.
Now I always say, because my granddad told me, it's a small group of people ruining it for everyone else. Doesn't matter if you're a kingdom at war, in your family, or if you work somewhere where there's one dude who's a dickhead. It'll always be a couple of people that spoil it for everyone else. Also, another fantastic performance here by Matt Smith. Just sitting there smugly smiling, you can tell he's relishing what happened. But she questions whether his orders included killing someone else if Aemon wasn't there, and though he denies it, we also don't know. Last week he even got asked what to do, but we cut just before he gave an answer.
What if we can't find him?
But yeah, I think he just wanted blood no matter what, and didn't travel all the way to King's Landing to return empty-handed. You also wonder if he's willing to give up the throne as well, because this is something he believed he should have. He even sees himself as being a better leader than Viserys, but the realm would have changed a lot under his rule. King Jaehaerys ushered in an age of peace, which is something that Viserys tried to mimic. Before him though was Maegor the Cruel, who I feel is someone that Damon would have emulated. Obviously we can't be sure, but there's definitely that darker side within him. Rhaenyra even says he kept this shit away, and he definitely has that sadistic side. Now the argument ends with him leaving for Harrenhal, which is something they've changed the order for in the show. Originally the Son for a Son chapter, it opens up with us hearing of Daemon's mission. We then get everything with Jacaerys before getting Lucerys' death. Daemon was at Harrenhal when all this happened, and he's the one who sent the Raven to Rhaenyra, informing her of her son's death. It's probably going to be a big scene in the show that will likely echo Aegon's conquest. When he initially conquered Westeros, Lord Harren refused to bend the knee to him. Thus, Balerion the Black Dread burned all of Harrenhal, which led to it being the ruinous location it is now. The curse of Harrenhal was thought to exist, and this was too blamed on Larys killing his father and brother. Also, just kinda wild that he had them killed, and is now actively trying to kill his strong nephews. Oh wait, they're not his. No relation, to be fair, no relation. Yeah, do what you want, Larys, mate. Look at all the feet that you want. Anyway, Bael is instructed to take her dragon Moondancer and keep a watch on King's Landing. We haven't really seen Moondancer in the show, but it's said to be a small dragon about the size of a warhorse. Though tiny, it was known for its speed, with Baela basically being sent as a scout. She gets a great scene with Jace, who she is of course betrothed to. I love the way she calls Helaena her uncle instead of saying to Jace, "What did you think about your father?"
What do you remember of my uncle?
It's subtle, but it shows they all know the truth, and they then start talking about Harwin. They bring up his nickname Breakbones, which is something he had in the books. It said, Breakbones, as he was called, was heir to Harrenhal, and said to be the strongest man in the Seven Kingdoms. Baela says he definitely loved Jace and his brother, and it highlights they're all aware of what's going on, but know it spells death for them if the truth's revealed. Really good seeing the character actually getting more to do in this season, as she kinda got overlooked in season 1. Cutting back to the Red Keep, Aegon and Helaena pass on the stairs, but he offers no comfort. That's his wife and sister, and the pair have both lost their child. It really highlights the fractures that are forming with the family now no longer really being together. Both cared for the child, but they were a couple due to duty. Because of this, they're not able to keep it together, and the loss on the pair is going to drive them towards anger and insanity. Jumping back to Dragonstone, we see Rhaenyra with the two young boys that she had with Damon. The way they're sat and playing on the floor, they're of course supposed to mirror Helena's twins and how they've been shown to us. These two are Prince Aegon III and also Viserys II. The little toys and figures we see them playing with are also akin to the ones picked up before in Jaehaerys' room. It perfectly highlights the cost of war and likely symbolises that the characters are similar rather than being the differences that they're forced to focus on. Cutting to Alicent, we see her and Kristen with him refusing to tend to her. In the end though, they always go back to it, and it basically sums up the entire characters. They're stuck in something they don't really want to do, but they keep going back to it. Both know they shouldn't, but they're trapped in a toxic cycle. It speaks volumes about the war itself, and how everyone's kind of stuck on a path that they don't want to be on. Alicent is just desperate for comfort, but she also craves isolation away from it all. Last week she kicked servants out the bathroom, and now they're completely absent. She's just on her own and submerges herself in the tub so she can further shut herself off from the world. She really should get some new clothes, and she could do that by checking our merch store out right below the video. We've got 3 House of the Dragon tees on there right now, including our Dragons, Drama and Destiny one, and there's also a Blacks and Green one, which will let you show the side that you're most loyal to. Bend the knee and buy some. As for Kristen, he's broken his oath and also his duty. Though he lambasts Arik for getting his cloak dirty, what he's up to is way worse in the eyes of the King's Guard. He even asks where Arik was when Jaehaerys was getting murdered, but Arik responds by asking the same thing. Kristen is just doing what Aegon did to him because he's deeply ashamed and wants to cast blame somewhere else. Now, the cloak is white because it symbolises purity, and it being muddy juxtaposes this ideal. Arik is a muddy cloak himself though because he's willing to kill his brother. Cain and Abel is of course a famous example of this, with it being something that influenced the Ark. The Kinslayer in the Ice and Fire universe is an accursed name that's said to bring with it several issues. The King's Guard are also supposed to deal out justice and truth, but this secret mission is one of deception.
We are sworn to serve forthrightly, not to traffic in deception.
It shows how twisted the kingdom under Aegon's rules become, as all those in the King's Guard are willing to bend the rules. You're not supposed to be with any woman because it means you have loyalties other than the realm. Kristen breaking it with Rhaenyra made him go a bit crazy, and I wonder if the same thing's gonna happen with Alicent. The guy's a bit of a wet wipe. Now the pair in this moment are desperate to keep themselves apart, but we see behind them that the flames are still burning. Really nice symbolism, and the next day we then see him hiring Arik. Arik goes back and forth over whether he should do it in the work with it explaining his conflict. So Arik did not undertake this mission happily. Indeed, Septon Eustace tells us the Troubled Knight visited the Red Keep Sept on the night he was to sail to pray for forgiveness to our Mother above. As the King's God sworn to obey King and Commander, he had no choice in honour but to make his way to Dragonstone, clad in the salt-stained garb of a simple fisherman. Now this treachery and deception leads to his death, but sticking to the rules is what saves Rhaenyra. She ends up freeing Mysaria, which in turn allows her to warn her of the plan. But this section's greatly expanded upon in the book. King Aegon also desired to avenge the murder of his heir by blood and cheese by means of an attack on Dragonstone, descending on the island citadel on Dragonback to seize or slay his half-sister and her bastard sons. It took all of the Green Council to dissuade him, so Criston Cole urged a different course. The pretender princess had made use of stealth and treachery to kill Prince Jaehaerys, Cole said. Let them do the same. We will pay the princess back in her own bloody coin, he told the king. The instrument the Lord Commander of the King's God chose for the king's vengeance was his sworn brother, Sir Arik Cargyle. Cutting to a brothel, we then see a woman with golden hair, and I wonder if this is a Targaryen bastard. Also, every time I say bastard, I sound like Robert Baratheon. Ned, you bastard! You bloody bastard, Ned! Anyway, I'll stop with that impression, but we know that these bastards exist in King's Landing, and bastards become a big part of the book. Like beyond the Strongs, the dragon seeds are extremely prevalent down the line, and we'll talk about them more in that spoiler section at the end of the video. So stick around. Aemon is here though, and we see him being comforted by a woman who's popped up in the season before. This is who they went to in episode 9 with us learning that she took his virginity. Aemon says he regrets Luke's death, and we're really seeing a vulnerable side to him. Saying that the small folk will be affected by the war, we then cut over to Hugh and his family. We learn the markets are running low due to the blockade, and that inflation's made chicken more expensive. Really applicable to real life, and how times of war have great effect on the masses. Last week we watched how Corlys' ship stopped boats, and we learned in the book that this affected trade. It said he strangled the gullet through his vast navy, and we then cut to Alan of Hull being reunited with his brother Adam. Like Hugh, both of these become big figures in the war to come. Adam's desperate to get in Corlys' good books, and we catch a tender moment with him and Rhaenys. The pair discuss Damon and whether he'll allow Rhaenyra to lead. There are thoughts he might challenge her rule, and at the moment, the hierarchy of power, it could be about to change and hit rock bottom. And this is because, had he not made the joke about the king for the day, then he may still be in charge. There could be the argument that he'd bring back the peace times, but I do feel like he is more of a war king. Rhaenyra pores over the legacy of her family, and we then see her pulling out the books. On the first image, we can see King Aegon and his sister brides in Visenya and Rhaenys. Rhaenys would of course go on to be named after her, and Rhaenyra's idol is also Visenya. She named her daughter after her, and also wears a similar braid to her. Visenya famously rode the dragon Vhagar, which we see a drawing of as she turns the page. Visenya is someone that Rhaenyra admires, but Vhagar killed her son. So it's complicated. On the right hand side we also have a passage that goes through several of the conquests. I was wondering if this was text pulled directly from Fire and Blood, but alas, it's new for the show. It talks about the First Dornish War and also discusses the Century of Blood. This began with Doom, and in the end it ravaged most of Essos. Visited by Mysaria, I think they then see a commonality in their genders. Both have been overlooked and brushed to the side because they're women, but they're way smarter than people give them credit for. Mysaria is someone whose history we know little about, but her legacy would of course last a long time. She's sort of this show's master of whisperers beyond Larys, with her having a great web. Rhaenyra asks how she got her scars, which is something we've only really seen recently. Typically in season 1, especially in the early entries, she wore either collar or coat to cover her neck. This was mainly when she was with Damon, as she knew being seen with her might make them question the heir. However, when she met with Otto in episode 9, the scar was indeed visible. At this point, she'd built up her own independence and was no longer relying on others. She refuses to answer, and though we don't know her history, it is likely this came from wearing a collar. This possibly was from her being a slave, though it might also explain why she's changed her accent. Hey. Now we hear how she built a home that the High Towers then set on fire. This is something that we saw in episode 9 with it being burned during the montage at the end. She says they'll never accept her, and it echoes how Rhaenyra won't be accepted either. Keeping Damon's word and freeing her eventually, we then get these moments intercut with Adam. Catching him at the beach, he finds a crab, which I thought it might be a nod to crab feeder. Just the way these moments play out here, it does kind of remind me of the beach scenes and how they were shot in episode 3. Overhead, I believe we see Sea Smoke, which was a dragon that we've seen in the show before. This was a key in defeating Crab Feeder, and it was rode by Rhaenyra. Adam gets up close to it down the line, which we will touch upon more later on in the video. Spoiler section's coming. Jumping to King's Landing, a great detail here is that you can also see scorpions lining the Red Keep. These giant crossbows were something we saw up close last week, with it showcasing how fortified it is. Now this highlighted why it was safer to send in blood and cheese, but killing the ratcatchers has proved to be vastly unpopular. In doing this, to get this one guy, Aegon's killed innocent people who all had friends and families. And dogs. Now this is what causes a further divide between Aegon and Otto, with Rhaenyra fans delivering what I think is his best performance. The fractures between them were highlighted in the work, and it went on to say, "Yet Sir Otto was losing the trust of his king, who mistook his efforts for inaction and his caution for cowardice." Septon Eustace tells us of one occasion when Aegon entered the Tower of the Hand and found Sir Otto writing another letter, whereupon he knocked the impot into his grandsire's lap, declaring, "Thrones are won with swords, not quills, spill blood, not ink." This line is played upon in the show, with us getting this:
"I wish to spill blood, not ink."
The book then talks about how Otto was ousted and replaced by Criston Cole. It says, "The delay did not sit well with the young king. Aegon II had run short of patience with his grandfather's prevarications." That's why I'm a YouTuber. Though his mother, the Dowager Queen Alicent, spoke up in Sir Otto's defence, his grace turned a deaf ear to her pleading. Summoning Sir Otto to the throne room, he tore the chain of office from his neck and tossed it to Sir Criston Cole. "My new hand is a steel fist," he boasted. "We are done with writing letters." Now this is then said in the episode,
"I wish to spill blood, not ink."
My new hand will be a steel fist.
Now from here, the passage says, "Sir Criston wasted no time improving his mettle. It is not for you to plead for support from your lords like a beggar pleading for alms," he told Aegon. "You are the lawful king of Westeros, and those who deny it are traitors. It is past time they learn the price of treason." Now in the next passage, we learn that beyond the mission with Arek, that they murdered all their political prisoners in the Red Keep. I'm not going to read out the whole thing because it's quite a long passage, but they were told they could either keep their oaths or swear to King Aegon. Those who refused were beheaded, with their heads being mounted on the spikes above the city gates. Now the book then sort of goes into Otto's firing, and we see in the show that he doesn't take it well. He calls Aegon an insolent pup, which is an insult he's thrown at him in the series before. Throwing the hand of the King Badge at his feet, we see as Otto's dismissed from the Game of Thrones. Felt bad for the guy, because no one would be anywhere without him, and in playing this game of treachery, he didn't expect it to hit him. Shut out the room, it ends his time as the Hand of the King, with the war he started leading to his dismissal. Isoria is then dismissed too, with Rhaenyra charting a boat to Pentos. Pentos is a location we've seen in the main show, with it being away from Westeros and a much safer place for Isoria since Jaehaerys' death. Spotting Sir Arek, she's like, "Hold on a second, that's not the wallet inspector." Now the book explains how he's able to just stroll in and know where he's going. It says, "Sir Arek was intimately familiar with the ancient seat of House Targaryen, having visited there often during the reign of King Viserys. Many fishermen still plied the waters of Blackwater Bay, for dragonstone depend on the sea for sustenance. It would be a simple thing to deliver cargyle to the fishing village under the castle. From there he could then make his own way to the Queen. And Sir Arek and his brother Sir Eric were twins, identical in all respects. Not even their fellows of the King's Guard could tell the two apart," both Mushroom and Septon Eustace assert. Once clad in white, Sir Arek should be able to move freely about Dragonstone, Sir Criston suggested. Any guards who chanced to encounter him would surely mistake him for his brother. Now this is exactly what ends up happening. He goes past the guards, and even though some have just seen Eric, he says they're not paying attention. It's such a good and tense scene, as we as viewers also don't know who's going to Rhaenyra. And the book isn't as dramatic, and the twins don't clash swords in her room. We don't even know if Arek was meant to kill her, as his true mission was shrouded in mystery. The true purpose of Sir Arek's mission remains a matter of some contention. Grand Maester Munkin tells us that Cargyle had been commanded to slay Rhaenyra, putting an end to her rebellion at a stroke, whilst Mushroom insists that her sons were Cargyle's prey, that Aegon II wished to wash the blood out of his murdered son with that of the bastard nephews Jacaerys and Joffrey Strong. So they kept it a lot simpler for the show, though he could want revenge on any of the kids, which is why we cut to Rhaenyra and Daemon's playing together before. However, I think what we get is great, and it's such a tense moment in the series. So Arek came ashore without hindrance, donned his armor and white cloak, and had no trouble gaining entrance to the castle in the guise of his twin brother, just as Criston Cole had planned. Deep in the heart of Dragonstone, however, as he was making his way to the royal apartment, the guards brought him face to face with Sir Eric himself, who knew at once what his brother's presence meant. The singers tell us that Sir Eric said, "I love you, brother," as he unsheathed his blade, and that Sir Eric replied, "And I you, brother," as he drew his own. Now we almost see them coming face to face early on, but Eric moves slyly around the halls. He also stealthily locks the doors and sends the guards on watch to retire. We also get a look at the painted table and the candles being moved out from under it. Created during Aegon's conquest, this gave a full bird's eye view of the realm. Lit from underneath, it allowed for gigantic strategies, and I loved seeing this little bit of maintenance. Going in, Eric draws his sword, but he's then interrupted by Eric. The confusion we see in the guard is also something from the work. The twins battle for the best part of an hour, Grand Maester Munkin says. The clash of steel on steel woke half the Queen's court, but the onlookers could only stand by helplessly and watch, but no man there could tell which brother was which. In the end, Sir Eric and Sir Eric dealt each other mortal wounds, and died in one another's arms with tears upon their cheeks. You really don't know who's winning and who's losing, and even when they get marked up, it's difficult to tell. That's what makes the end of the fight so tense, as you don't know if Rhaenyra's about to get killed or not. Mushroom's account is shorter, saltier, and altogether nastier. The fight lasted only moments, our fool says. There were no declarations of brotherly love. Each Cargyle denounced the other as a traitor as they clashed. Sir Eric, standing above his twin on the spiral steps, struck the first mortal blow. The savage downward cut that nigh took his brother's sword arm off at the shoulder, but as he collapsed, Sir Eric grasped his slayer's white cloak and pulled him close enough to drive a dagger deep into his belly. Sir Eric was dead before the first guard arrived, but Sir Eric took 4 days to die of his gut wound, screaming in horrible pain and cursing his traitor brother all the while. For obvious reasons, singers and storytellers have shown a marked preference for the tale told by Munkin. Maesters and other scholars must make their own determination as to which version's more likely. All that Septon Eustace says upon the matter is that the Cargyle twins slew each other, and there we must leave it. Now, it's a massive moment in the show, which ends with Eric committing seppuku. In the different tellings in the book, the death is by a sword in the gut, which gets him, and a sort of the same thing here. Was really shocked to see it though, and we know this tale ends up becoming legend. The tale became notable in the song Farewell My Brother, with it marking another 2 brutal deaths in the war. Cutting back to Otto and Alicent, we then hear the former moaning away about his old boss. Now we also hear of Daemon, who's a character that's been absent in the show. When I did my Every Dragon Explained video, I said I didn't bother mentioning him as I didn't know if he was going to be in the series or not. Shout out to Avon Boxdale 2506 for pointing out though that the showrunners have confirmed he's in it. Known as Daemon the Daring, Daemon was actually the most popular son of Viserys and Alicent. Unfortunately though, he didn't initially get the spotlight that they did. Born shortly after Jace was, the book says that Viserys insisted they share a wet nurse so the pair could become milk brothers. Daemon ended up getting pushed to the side though when he was sent to work as a cupbearer for Alicent's cousin Lord Ormond Hightower. When Otto says he'll return home, he mentions how Daemon resides there and he'll help him in the weeks to come. I'm guessing that they're going to use that to explain where he's been, but it's nice to hear him getting name dropped in the show. Like the book, Alicent also says she'll speak to Aegon, but it's clear that it's over. He just sees it as them being against the world, and when she admits her sin, he says he just doesn't care. It's a really tender moment where the pair have been on opposite sides within the house in the past, but now they're seeing that all they have is each other. Him not wanting to hear though might also show he's not interested in her issues, but I do see it as being something that doesn't matter because deep down he still loves her. Still though, there are different ways you can read the reactions, and I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Either way, Alicent doesn't share anything with her own child, and we see her coming across Aegon crying. Rather than going up to him, she ends up leaving and she slumps off to get some Kristen Pole. Getting hot and heavy spoilers. Anyway, it shows the predicament she's in. She isn't getting anything she feels like love or care from those around her, and thus she can't give it to her own kids. Thus, she just ends up returning to Kristen, who's the only person letting her feel something. It wraps up a brilliant episode that I felt like a lot of the actors gave their best performances in. Emma Darcy was great as Rhaenyra as well, and it topped off another great one. The Eric and Eric fight was something I thought was okay in the work, but they really went above and beyond with it here. It closed out what's another great entry, and that takes us into that promised spoiler section. If you're leaving now, then please hit the thumbs up on your way out, and huge thank you for checking out the video. Hopefully I'll see you back same time next week, where we'll break down episode 3 right after the episode. The harrenhal is a big part of the book, with Damon taking over it. This is obviously how he sent a raven out from it, and it becomes a stronghold in the war. It lets the blacks fight from more than just dragonstone, and the greens are forced to engage with them at multiple locations. It riffs off the back of Aegon's conquest, in which the castle was taken. This is also shown in the intro when we get the tapestry of what's come before. Hugh Hammer and Adam of Hull are of course major parts of the work too. We discussed in the spoiler section last week about how the dragon seeds are recruited by the blacks. These are all the bastards' descendants, and thus they're said to have the blood of the dragon. This lets them be dragon riders, and ain't no prizes for guessing who Adam goes after. He of course tamed sea smoke and was a formidable fighter in the war. Now as for Hugh Hammer, he ends up getting Vermithor, who we saw during episode 10. Damon sang to the dragon, and he was absolutely gigantic. I love how we're kind of seeing how poor Hugh is. Well, I don't love it, because it's bad for him, but it does give motive to why he does what he does. The dragon seeds are promised land and riches if they join Rhaenyra, so it makes sense he'd take this stand against the king. I'm guessing that Aegon doesn't come through on this early payment, and this is what makes him turn against the king. Anyway, that's the end of the breakdown, and obviously let me know your thoughts on the episode below. Please drop a like again, it's free to do, obviously it makes a massive difference to us. And if you want to give something, then please consider clicking the join button right below the video. It all helps videos like this get produced. It really makes a massive difference to us just having that steady stream of income coming in. And it just pays. It pays for it. You know, we've got great editors behind the scenes. I might be hosting it and writing the scripts, but there's so much work going on back there where the guys are working away to make these episodes seem as good as possible. And yeah, it's all because of stuff like that. So I really appreciate it. If you want something else to watch, you've got a video on the screen right now breaking down the latest boys episode, so definitely head over there right after this. But out of the way, thank you for watching this video. I've been your host Paul, you've been the best, and I'll see you next time. Take care, peace.